Let's discuss this now with the University of Johannesburg's political economy professor, Isaac Khambule. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for your time. I want us to start with that issue that the president's spokesperson and advisor just said, which comes from a Washington Post article that claims that there's now been an instruction to all officials that they should not further engage with South Africa on G20 matters. Yes, of course, I mean, both the advisor to the president and the minister in the presidency today said there has been no official communique to the country. But that's not how President Trump operates, though.
As well to your viewers. No, definitely that is not how Trump operates. We know that the Washington Post did post about this particular article that says the White House National Security Council was instructed not to work with South Africa on anything that has to do with the G20 that will be hosted in South Africa in November and December. But from the early indications, it seems as if Trump is just playing his strategy of setting South Africa at a back foot so that when the country goes to negotiate with him, there are certain things that he's going to have on the plate and then end up saying, look, if you want me to be part of the G20 summit in South Africa and also to give it more authority, you need me there. But there are particular indications and as well as particular policy stances that I want you to concede to before we can talk about some of these particular developments, because it may seem that if he has instructed the National Security Council indeed, then it is likely to be the case that there were plans that were afoot for Trump to be in South Africa in November when the G20 takes place. So this is just something that is developing and should be interesting to see if there are any truths to it.
And that, of course, coming from an administration whose president or head keeps dropping messages that suggest that he may not even come to the Heads of State Summit in November, but at the same time not saying it quite categorically that he won't.
Definitely. I mean, he's been throwing bombs left and right about South Africa, about the genocide, or purported genocide that is happening in South Africa, leaving the genocide that is happening within the cases of Israel. But I think what seems to be quite interesting here is Donald Trump seems to be being influenced by Elon Musk, as recently we also saw a particular glitch that happened within X and as well as the X AI system, of which was then basically indicating issues that are related to South Africa and genocide in all the posts that they were being tagged in, of which again seems to be furthering the misconception that South Africa is promoting any genocide as a manner of actually putting South Africa into a corner in order for the US to be able to negotiate its deals and as well as also try to get South Africa to withdraw its case in the ICJ against Israel. But in this case, it seems to be quite an interesting time for South Africa. And I think one of the most important things is the South African government should play the role that it has been playing of quiet diplomacy and trying to talk through proper channels rather than in the media as it has done overall.
And of course, I mean, earlier this week, following the arrival in the United States of the group of Afrikaners who claim they are being hounded out, he again, President Trump that is, repeated his assertion that these people were being, had to leave the country because of racially motivated plots, claiming that it's all part of this genocide that he alleges is being perpetrated against these people. And all of what I've spoken about so far in the last minute or so has led to many people saying or suggesting at least that the South African delegation, President Ramaphosa and his delegation, are going to come across a very hostile reception when they get to the United States next week.
true, but I think what we have seen in relation to Trump is that he likes playing to the gallery, but at the back door, he is able to be a statesman and negotiate with particular nations. Because even now, we are seeing him negotiating with countries such as Iran, of which have been seen as particular countries that are anti-America, but he's able to negotiate with such countries. And this tells you that in as much as there's a particular public gallery that he tends to play to, but at the back foot, he understands that he's supposed to be a statesman and that he must also find ways of working with many nations across the globe. And in this particular case, I would say that South Africa is quite lucky because it does have the backing of the EU. And with that particular backing, it does show that there are no genocide or genocidal intentions that are happening in South Africa. So at the end of the day, he knows that he's just spreading particular malicious rumors about South Africa, of which the entire globe is not taking seriously. So it is only an issue that is debated between Trump and as well as the Republicans. The Democrats in the US know exactly that there's no genocide in South Africa. So it's an issue of him appealing to the far right rather than an issue that is contextualized within the international political space.
But then, I mean, if one looks at the reception that he gave the Ukrainian president, right? Where's our luck, as you put it? Where would our luck come from? In other words, what is it that we have that he would be looking for? Why would he not want to, or what would stop him from offending President Ramaphosa and do exactly what he did with President Zelensky?
What we have in our favor are the particular minerals that the US needs in South Africa. But at the same time, I think we must also look at the statesman that President Ramaphosa is, a person who does not necessarily engage in public spat, because we also remember that during the time there was a public spat between South Africa and Rwanda, President Ramaphosa never responded through these particular platforms. He was able to relax and be calm and deal it in a manner that does not necessarily demean the other individual, of which is something that we saw with Zelensky when he visited the US. So that kind of approach will then set Trump at the back foot, of which again is likely to cause more harm towards what he's currently saying if he becomes, if I could put it in this way, that if he becomes more hostile to the president, then the president is not going to be hostile to him. He's going to become, he's going to show humility, of which is again something that Trump does not necessarily thrive in, because he thrives whereby the other counterparts are going to be hostile as well. So it is something that is unlikely to work in his favor. And secondly, I think South Africa and the US do have great relations. So there is bound to be some sort of a good welcoming to the US, even though it is unlikely that President Ramaphosa would be welcomed by President Trump, but it is likely to be someone who is senior within the US who's going to give South Africa a warm welcome.
But then, well, certainly not at a public level. President Kagame is not as erratic, can be, or dramatic and unpredictable, and sometimes, often in fact, undiplomatic as President Trump tends to be.
Definitely, definitely. I think, Vuyo, some of the core things that we must also reflect on here are, this is definitely going to be at a global stage. South Africa is hosting the G20, and Trump, in as much as he is currently in the offensive against the entire world in terms of his trade war, he does understand as well that he does not want to isolate the countries that are within the G20, because those are the countries that tend to make America and as well as the American ideology stronger. So it is something that he understands that this is a gathering of some of the most powerful nations. So if he's not here, then it is likely to be the case that there's going to be a new world order or a global agenda that is going to be forged without the US in it. And that would likely mean that the US will be at the back foot in terms of the new era that we will be entering, again with China also being quite powerful and also courting many friendships within the EU, of which could be to the detriment of the US's influence. So from where I'm standing, Definitely, Trump can be erratic at times, but in this particular case, it is going to be a calculated move. It's going to bring issues of the genocide that is purporting to be happening in South Africa. And the president, again, in terms of President Ramaphosa, is going to respond with facts, with numbers, and as well as we must also look at the delegation that he is taking to the US, of which I'm suspecting that is also likely to involve some members of the parties in the GNU, of which again are going to be able to counter the claims that Trump may have against South Africa.
Of course, not that facts ever stood in the way of the US president expressing whatever view he prefers to express at whatever time and whatever the circumstances. Prof, let me thank you very much for your time and insights. Really appreciate it.